Hello and welcome to the Ottawa Herald's 2012 Kansas Primary Candidate Interviews. I'm Bobby Burch and I'm here with candidate John Coen. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Coen.
Thank you, Bobby.
Mr. Coen is a Republican candidate seeking election in Kansas' 12th Senate District, which encompasses all of Franklin County and a couple neighboring counties as well. Let's get started. So just to get a little bit more background about you, what kind of political experience do you have, Mr. Coen?
Well, I'm a lifelong resident of Ottawa and Franklin County, and previously I've served Ottawa on the school board. I'm currently a 13-year member of Ransom Memorial Hospital Board of Trustees. I'm a 30-plus member of the Ottawa Chamber of Commerce and a 30-plus member of Franklin County Farm Bureau. And additionally, I've served in other capacities, PTAs, site councils. Most recently, I worked hard to try to bring a YMCA to our community, and that didn't come to fruition, but I've served in that capacity as well. I think somebody who is in politics is somebody who's willing to volunteer their time for the better of the community and serving people. And so to that extent, I've been in politics in this community for over 30 years.
Okay. If elected, how do you think that experience is going to translate to a state office?
I think that experience is my biggest asset. I said I've lived in this community all my life, so I think that I have a good understanding of what the people in this community want and how their thoughts are formed and how they raise their families and understand what their motivations are. And I would I'd like to use that experience to represent us in the Senate and in the Kansas legislature. I think it'll be important to have that voice for rural America. Back in the 80s, we used to be concerned in Farm Bureau of what are we going to do when we have an urban legislature. Well, we're there now, and we need to have a voice that understands what's important in rural America. We need to be able to educate our children in our home communities, take care of our sick, and support our society here in rural America. Our mill doesn't raise millions of dollars like it does in urban America. Urban America needs to realize that we have a symbiotic relationship with rural America. That sure, they can raise a lot of tax dollars, but for us, we have a lot of things too. We provide energy, we provide food and goods, and so we need to, it's going to have to be both ways, and there's got to be a quid pro quo, and we're going to have a realization of somebody that can communicate that differences and intervene on behalf now than it ever has been.
So why did you opt to, or before I ask that, why do you think that you are the best candidate for the job?
Well, I think that's basically what I've described. Additionally, I should mention too that for near 30 years, it was about 20-some years, about 26, and my wife and I owned and operated a dairy in well, about halfway between Ottawa and Wellsville. We have a Wellsville address and an Ottawa phone. We're in the Ottawa School District. So I've got that business experience. We spent our summers showing at fairs with our kids. We have 4 children. We were involved in our church activities, and we belong to Westminster Presbyterian. And that was how we raised our children. There in 2006, that summer, I was actually visiting with a good friend of mine, Derek Schmidt, who was currently, or at that time, serving as the Senate Majority Leader. He's currently the Attorney General, but in that conversation, I was kind of lamenting some of the economic realities of small Kansas dairies. We were paying our bills, but we weren't making a living, and at one time, Franklin County was the largest dairy county in the state of Kansas, both in terms of number of dairies and number of cows. That's long since passed. And economic realities has kind of set in. So I was talking with Derek about this. About a week later, he called me up and said, would you be interested in a spot on my staff? Well, we hadn't really talked about selling the cows, but this was the first time an opportunity was actually in front of us, and so we made the decision in October of 2006, and that's when we sold the cows, and I went to work for Derek in Topeka for a couple years. Made a run at the House then in 2008, and then went back to work in the legislature for Stephen Morrison for a year, before I had the opportunity then in 2009 to become a loan officer at the Kansas State Bank. I like to cite my experience of working in the Senate for 3 years as a good foundation for being able to know how consensus is made, how we reach and arrive at good legislation, and how communication happens from communities up to the Senate floor and ultimately the governor's office. So I like to cite that experience as maybe giving me a leg up in the process and being able to hit the ground running from day one.
Why did you opt to run for a state office or a Senate office as opposed to the House?
Well, life is funny in the way, in the directions that it takes you, and the way it can turn on a dime. On June the 8th, we were actually headed to a family wedding, and we were going to be out of town all weekend on our way to Wichita. My niece was getting married, and my cell phone started ringing on the way to Wichita that morning. Hey, did you hear what the judges did last night? It's crazy. And Ottawa's in an open seat. There's not a sitting senator or representative. And I had several calls from good friends asking if I would consider running. And I'm not somebody that has accumulated wealth. I have to have a job, because serving in the Senate is not it is a paying job, but it's not a well-paying job. You can't support a family on that. So I thought, well, it's something that I've always wanted to do, would like to have done. Hadn't even thought about it because of the great service that Pat Apple had been giving our community for so many years. Pat's a good friend, and who can question the dedication he's had to Ottawa and our community? But this was all of a sudden a new thing. Pat's out. Jeff King had represented a little bit of southern Franklin County, and he'd been moved out. So there wasn't a senator in our district. I got calls all weekend. I was out of town. I thought, gosh, this is something I'd like to do. It's just not going to work out this time. There'll be another time. But Sunday evening when I got home, I called the ownership of the bank and talked to them about this opportunity. And wow, this is something they hadn't considered. Monday morning, they called me back and said, Kansas State Bank is a community bank. We want to be involved in the total life of the community. This is important for this community. We want to support you, and if you want to make a run for the Senate seat, go ahead. And so literally in the 11th hour, I drove to Topeka and filed. Not something I was planning. Kind of like back in '06, I really wasn't planning on selling the cows, but when an opportunity presents itself, and I think it's an opportunity for Ottawa too, and that's when I got in the race and how I did it.
Okay. So just to give our viewers a better sense of who you are, I know you mentioned quite a bit of organizations that you've been a part of.
Sure.
Well, maybe could you tell us a little bit about maybe some organizations that are close to you as a person, and maybe volunteer work or anything like that?
Of course, we work in our church a lot. That's very important to us. And then the hospital board is volunteer work. I'm a big supporter of Ransom Memorial Hospital. It's a very big part of the lifeblood of this university. My work to try to establish a YMCA here in the community, that was all volunteer. I mean, those are all things that I've served just because for the greater good. I think that we have to give back more than ourselves. I had the opportunity just last night to hear Representative Dennis Hassard. He's no longer serving in Congress, but was Speaker of the House back in the 90s when he was serving in Congress. And he said sometimes politicians get a bad name, but he said a politician is really no more than somebody that lives and works in the community that's willing to intervene on everybody's behalf. He says everybody that is working in a PTA, that is working in a church for the greater good of the community and the greater good of the church, he says everybody in that sense is a politician. And it was very inspiring, but for the first time, it gave me a sense for what politics really is. We all have a stake in this game. We all want a better future, not only for ourselves, but our children and what comes behind us. And so I think that's why we volunteer, why we should volunteer, and a big part of the reason is why I'm running in this race.
Well, in your Herald questionnaire, you say that ensuring Kansas that Kansas children receive a quality education is among your top priorities. And
Yes.
just wondering, why is that?
You know, the children that are in the school system today, we only have one bite at the apple with those kids. We can't go back and say, oops, we didn't fund that enough and you didn't have the advantages you should have. We can't go back and pick that up. We have to meet that obligation today. Our grandparents paid for our education and our parents paid for our education. We have to step up and pay for our kids that are here now and make sure that there's a strong education system for the kids that are coming behind us. I think that we've embarked on a reckless fiscal planning for the state of Kansas. If projections by economists come true, by 2018 we will be $2.7 billion underwater. I like to call that Las Vegas economic. We're betting on the come. If it works, that's great, but if it doesn't, they're going to be looking to us to make that up, and we need to figure that out as we go along. We can't buy a lottery ticket to pay for our children's education. We have to plan as we go forward. We can't miss out on the children. The children that are in the school district now are going to be the children that help us to get to a saner time, to more economic stability. We don't want to miss out on a generation.
Well, from your observations and experience, what are some, have you seen any necessary improvements to the education system in Kansas?
Every place I go, everybody supports education. Everybody gets that we have to educate our children. I don't get pushback on that. I do hear that we want the dollars to go to the classroom. That we've got to make sure that the teachers in the classroom are being paid and that they're having the materials, the curriculum, and what they need to provide education. And so I think that's the big issue with people. I've never known my fellow Kansans to be against paying taxes. What Kansans do not like is irresponsible spending. And I'm against irresponsible spending. We have to make sure that the dollars that we pay are going to the functions that we want to happen. And that needs to be educating our children, providing an infrastructure for our state. That we can't let our highway system degenerate. They did that in Missouri, and they can't catch up now. We have to maintain our highway system. And so those two things are where, as I go from community to community, I hear consistently we have to pay these bills and we have to figure out a way to do this.
Well, also in your questionnaire to the Herald, you mentioned another priority is expanding job opportunities in Kansas. If elected, how would you plan to stimulate job growth here in the district?
We need to downsize government every opportunity we have. Government needs to get out of the way and allow Kansas businessmen to prosper. And to that end, as they prosper, our Kansas economy prospers. So that is the biggest thing I think we need to do. We need to get out of the way of Kansas businessmen and create opportunities for them to grow and help local communities. Pat Apple started Project 17, and that's something that I would like to champion as we go forward as the new senator from this district. And the theory behind that is that a rising tide raises all ships. And the best example we have of that is when Wolf Creek came to Burlington. That didn't come to our home community here in Ottawa. It didn't come to the home community down in Iowa. But both of these communities benefited greatly from that coming to the area. That was in the real last housing boom that we've experienced here in Ottawa. So we need to understand that we've got to have a bigger eye when it comes to recruiting and providing economic development, with NBAF actually starting to get some traction in Manhattan. There are going to be some opportunities. Additionally, we've got the intermodal going in up near Gardner. There are going to be some opportunities for some economic development. We need to recruit on a regional basis and provide opportunities as a multi-county area that will create benefits for everybody in all communities.
So you mentioned this earlier. After the Kansas budget was passed, the legislature research staff estimated that there'd be quite a shortfall in the budget, and 2.5 or 2.7 billion by 2018. What are some of the specifics that you might find troublesome with that budget?
Well, I think by and large, we need to get back to funding our state government with the three-legged stool that we've used for over 100 years. And that involves some form of income tax, sales tax, and property tax. When we cut one of those legs off the stool, then it becomes, we're sitting on an uneven chair, and it becomes dangerous. You and I didn't receive a tax break from this last economic policy that came out. It went to corporate America. And but yet, if this plan fails, who are they going to go to make up the shortfall? At that point, you and I will be involved. And it's going to be Katie bar the door at that point, because it's going to be impossible to make up those funds that we haven't had over those several years. That's why I characterize it as risky and reckless, and how we have to take a more responsible and conservative approach to our finances in the state.
Well, you did discuss your comment of Las Vegas economics, so we'll skip over that. But in general, well, I guess in your questionnaire you say that there's somewhat of a confrontational attitude in legislature.
Well, yes, and I think we saw that by inaction on some of the bigger things that affect us, such as drawing the district lines. I think we have to have a common sense approach, and we have to have a voice for the people in our community. And it's not about being a voice for the governor or a voice for leadership. It's about being a voice for the people in District 12.
In general, I know you've touched on this quite a bit, but in general, what were your impressions of the last legislative session?
I think confrontation and stalemate are the best two words that can characterize that.
Okay. Well, I recently read that you and Kansas Governor Sam Brownback have some history together. Would you mind telling some viewers about that?
Well, Sam and I actually started out as freshmen in college together in Marlatt Hall at K-State. I was in room 106 and he was, I think, in room 109. We were just good friends. We went a similar path. We actually each pledged the same fraternity, Alpha Gamma Rho. Sam went on to be the national FFA president and dropped out of college for a few years to pursue those endeavors. And I actually came home and farmed for a couple of years, and we came back at the same time, ended up graduating at the same time. And we're good friends, but at some point our vision for how we provide for our state have diverged, but I will always be friends with Sam Brownback.
Okay. Well, also in your Herald questionnaire, you mentioned emphasis in maintaining infrastructure and roads. How would you work toward that?
Well, in hard economic times, it's hard to come out with a program that is going to be sweeping over the state of Kansas. The last one we saw was when where Ottawa, where the bypass of 59 that goes to Lawrence, between Ottawa and Lawrence, was created, and also a bypass down on 69 going into Fort Scott when that was upgraded. Those types of programs actually are good economic development. Those people spend their money and buy their resources in the counties they work in, so that was good economic development. So we've got to bear in mind that as we work on roads in our home communities, that is a good way to put state money to actually expand in communities. So I would support new projects, but more than anything in hard economic times, we have to have a strong maintenance program. We don't want to fall behind just because times are tough, because then you just can never catch up. So I'm going to support a transportation program that includes new projects and is strong on maintenance of what we have.
Okay. Well, right now we're going to go to some questions from readers. This first question is from Dean Kett, the superintendent of the Ottawa School District. Do you support changes to the school finance formula?
I think the formula that we've had has served us well. It's complicated and it's hard to explain, but yet at the same time our superintendents have become comfortable and know how to manage that, and it has provided a good income source for our schools. I would be trying to, the only thing I would like to see dollars diverted in the formula to ensure that we are paying teachers a salary that they can make a good living on. And when you talk about economic development, dollars that are paid in teacher salaries has been proven time and time again have a multiplier effect of 4 in our local communities. As teachers are paid more, they buy more, they pay more sales tax, they pay more income tax, and it's a huge multiplying factor in the communities. You know, chances of us bringing in 2 or 3 corporations that hire 200 people are not good, or not as good as increasing the salaries of our teachers and getting them to spend the people that live in this community right now, getting them to spend those dollars in our home community. That's a good source of economic development.
Okay. This next question is from Dale Reese. I think he is a member of Ottawa, or a resident of Ottawa. How do you feel about our Second Amendment and gun rights?
I am a big Second Amendment person. I believe the Second Amendment was put in there to ensure that we had the right to protect ourselves from the government becoming too powerful, and I'm a big Second Amendment person.
This next question is from Cody Kaiser, and also an Ottawa resident. Where do you stand on the Citizen United bill that states corporations are people too?
Corporations are not people. I'm not necessarily familiar with exactly with what, I'm not sure if I understand the intent of the actual question, or if it even has application in state government for sure. But they are treated like corporations in that they are given tax breaks, and this might be where he's getting to. I'm not sure. I hate to respond if I don't fully understand the question, but that,
okay.
You know.
All right. Well,
if Mr. Kaiser, my email address is, I can provide that. I don't know, now is the appropriate time, but
yeah, we can put it up at the
yeah.
end of it.
You know, I'm happy to communicate with email so we could kind of flesh out exactly where he was wanting to understand.
All right. Well, Franklin County's fair is coming up, and I was just wondering what you think of the fair and its importance to the community.
Oh, it's huge. It's been a huge, important part of my family's life. For over 20 years, we spent that week pretty much living at the fair. All our children showed, and it's the great community gathering. So not only does it get people out and visiting with one another, but it's just a good time for children. I'm a big believer that 4-H teaches life skills, as does FFA, and it's a big opportunity for those young people that have projects and are involved in those organizations to display and to show what they've worked on. Life skills are what we need to be about teaching in a community, and the fair is definitely a great opportunity to showcase all of that.
Well, you just mentioned it, that a lot of the fair's activities relate to 4-H.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondering your impression of 4-H and its importance to the community, and maybe building an understanding of agriculture.
Well, I should predicate my answer by saying, you know, my wife and I are lifelong 4-H members, as are all of my kids, and my daughter actually is the 4-H program assistant for the new Frontier District, which is Franklin and Osage, so I'm going to be a very big supporter of 4-H.
Okay.
But I'm a big supporter of all youth organizations. I'm not supporting it over another organization. But 4-H, like I said, I think is a great organization to teach life skills. And you got to remember that 4-H isn't just all cows, sows, and plows. It also involves a lot of other things. There's reading, photography, cooking, woodworking. It's a lot of things. Gardening. My wife and I both enjoy gardening. That's how we relax. Those are primarily skills that I learned when I was a young person in 4-H. So to that extent, I think 4-H is great. Is it better than Boy Scouts? No, it's as good. You know, there's many youth organizations that provide that education. 4-H is one of those.
All right, great. Well, thanks for coming in, Mr. Coen. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
And that concludes our interview with candidate John Coen.
Thank you.